Welcome to part 1 in this Photoshop scripting series. Today I'm going to be going through some basic JavaScript tags that you can use in Photoshop just to give you an introduction into simple JavaScript writing. If you haven't used JavaScript before, or what Adobe use called ExtendScript, then I'd recommend looking at the docs beforehand, just to get your mind around what the tags mean. We're going to be using Visual Studio Code, which you can download from code.visualstudio.com. We're going to be using this to write our code. So once you've installed Visual Studio Code, we're going to load a folder into our workspace, just so we can keep it all neat and tidy. I've already created a folder called Photoshop Scripts Episode 1. You can follow suit if you want, or call it anything that you like. I've also created a 2000 by 2000 Photoshop file, just so that we can have a play around with a couple of things. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to create a new file inside our folder, and we're just going to call it script.jsx, and then this will automatically load up for you. So another thing that we're going to do before we actually start coding anything is we're going to go to our keyboard shortcuts, and we're going to create a shortcut so that we can load our scripts easier without having to go to File, Browse, and then Scripts. I think I replaced it with the Bridge shortcut because I don't really use Bridge. So I'm using Control B, just so it loads the file browser without me having to navigate through all the file browse and then scripts browse. So the first thing we're going to do, we're going to set a variable. Let's just make this a bit bigger. We're going to create a variable for our document so that we can access the document elements. So the first thing we're going to do is var doc, and then app would be Photoshop, and then we're going to choose active document. So template.psd is our app.active document, and then if we just do an alert, which is a dialog pop-up in Photoshop, we can say doc.name. So we're going to browse for this script, and we're going to load it, and then a script alert comes up saying that the file name is template.psd. So that's pretty simple and easy to follow along. We can do doc.layers, and this will load an object. Now obviously there's going to be more than one layer, so we need to access the layers in a particular order. So say now we've got a background layer, and then we've got layer 1. So if we do doc.layers, and then we want to access this object, which it classes as an array. So an array in JavaScript would look like this. So we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4. So this is an array of 4 different elements. And with JavaScript, if we wanted to access a particular element in this array, it starts at 0 rather than 1. So if we wanted to get the number 3 from this object, we would want to alert layers 2. So when we load Photoshop now, this should alert the number 3. If you wanted to get the number 1 from this, we would choose 0, because it starts from 0 rather than 1. So when we alert that now, it's going to say 1. So if we change this to say background, and then layer 1. So now we wanted to access the layer 1 layer, we would choose number 1, because obviously background is 0, and then this is position 1. and as you can see, it's now saying layer 1. So if we put this into the actual Photoshop script, so we've got our docs.layers, which is exactly the same as what we were just looking at. Say now we wanted to get the name of the first layer, we would go layers, position 0, and then dot name. And I put docs instead of doc. It will give us layer 1. Now the order of the layers in Photoshop will go from top to bottom. So layer 1 would be position 0 and background would be position 1. So again, if we wanted to access the background layer, we would change this to position 1, and then it gives us the name. So that's pretty easy. So we're going to rename a layer. We're going to change layer 1 to say layer 2. So we're going to set a variable, and we're going to just call this rename, and then we go into access the layers. So we're going to do doc.layers, and then we want the first layer, which is position 0, and then we're going to close that, and then we're going to rename this layer dot name, and we want to change it to layer 2. Now when we run this script, it's been changed to layer 2, which is great. So let's get rid of that. Actually, because we've now associated the variable rname with this first layer, we can now access this obviously through the alert. So we can just do rname.name, and as you can see, it's still outputting the exact same thing, but obviously it's easier to write. So now we're going to create a text layer. So we're going to call this, we're just going to do text. I'm going to align it in the center like this, and then we're just going to call this text layer. So when you've got multiple layers in groups, and you got hundreds of layers, you don't want to be counting where it is in the list. So we're going to access this layer now by looking at the name of the layer. So we're going to get rid of all this, and then we are going to alert. So we're going to access the doc, we're going to do layers, and then we're going to use a function called get by name. And all we need to do, and I think it is case sensitive, so we're going to copy the name of this layer, which is text layer, like this, and then we're going to run the script, and this is actually called an art layer because it's a text layer. So we're going to go back to Visual Studio now, and we're going to rename this layer. So we're going to take this, and we're going to call this text layer, so we don't have to keep writing out doc.layers.getName text layer. And now we're going to change the content of this layer. We're going to change this text to say something else. So we're going to do tlayer dot text item dot contents. This will now allow us to change the contents of this text item, and we want to set it to text2. So when we run this script now, it changes the text in this layer. So then if we wanted to grab the contents of this text layer, it's simply the case of doing tlayer, because we've already assigned it here by getting the name, dot text item dot contents. Now because we're not changing it, we don't need to write equals and then whatever we wanted to change it to. We just want to grab what's inside it. So when we alert this now, it should say text2. It's pretty simple. We're not going to go into anything too serious in this tutorial, but we'll go through a few more couple of things. So you might have some groups. So we're going to call this group 1, and then we're going to move the text layer into there. Now, when we run this script now, it can't find the text layer because it's been moved within a group. So first thing we have to do is we have to find the group and then the text layer. So the first thing you would need to do, so we're going to call this variable the group, and then we want to do dot layer set to get the group, and then get by name group 1. So our variable has been set to group, so we should now be able to access any layers within this group. So we're going to change tlayer. Instead of using the doc as the parent, we're now going to use the group variable as the parent. So now when we alert this, it finds the layer. See, now we had multiple layers in here, and we wanted to count how many layers were in the group. All we would need to do is access the group variable dot layers dot length. We've got 6 layers in there, which is correct. Again, if we wanted to access a different layer in here, so now we wanted to access layer 4, we would choose layer 4, just in case it's case sensitive. Call this L4, and we want to remove this layer, so we would do L4 dot remove. And that layer has now disappeared. Let's remove layer 6. So we're going to just change this to layer 6, and we're going to just call this R for remove. Layer 6 has now disappeared. So now we're going to set layer 7 to be invisible. So we're going to do R dot visible equals false. That layer is now hidden. Let's hide the text layer. We're going to grab T layer, put it in here, run our script. Our text layer is now invisible. Let's bring it back. So we're going to change this now from false, which is no, and we're going to change it to true, which is yes. There you go. So say now you wanted to make a duplicate of a layer. We would just do duplicate, run the script, and there you go, you got a copy. And if we run it again, we should get another copy. But it's adding this text copy stuff. When you duplicate a layer, it adds the copy on the end. But we want to rename this layer. Okay, so when we duplicate it, we want to add on to this process by saying, let's change the name to text layer. So text layer 2. There you go. And then it switches back then to the original layer that you were copying. So keep an eye out for episode 2. That should be coming next week. But I hope you found this useful. Until then, I'll see you next week.